Welcome to the Restored Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Josh and Jaelyn Harrell.
We are a husband and wife who are passionate about partnering with people to rebuild, restore, and renew their lives to the purpose God has for them.
In 2018, God took our broken marriage and restored it to something beautiful, and we believe He wants to restore the parts of your life that seem broken too.
Join with us as we talk openly about what it looks like to walk out restoration in Jesus and what it means to let the cracks in our story become the greatest evidence of God's love for us.
This is Restored Living.
It was like 1 second.
You're the slurper this time.
This is what they do on TikTok.
It's like not fun to listen to. I don't know what people find about it that's so enjoyable. Don't even.
I saw someone at Costco and they gave their kid their phone.
Oh no.
Which first mistake. And he's just
Enamored.
out loud listening to this girl do ASMR.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
And I was like, I literally.
It's so cringy to me. I don't know.
I mean, I understand the appeal.
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be like sensory,
right?
For hearing, but it's I don't know. It's weird.
She just do pop.
And then they grab like little like bubble wrappers or like slime and they'll like,
I mean, it's just like that's all
gosh,
they do is those videos. And I'm just like,
and like millions of people watch them.
And it's not real. Like it's not real things.
No, it's very weird.
But then like you need it's a whole thing.
It's a whole other conversation.
We could talk about tech for a long time, I feel like.
A whole other conversation.
Here we are not doing ASMR and doing a podcast instead.
No ASMR from here.
We both took drinks at the same time. We're twinsies.
We are. We're in sync.
Well, today is a very special Restored Living podcast. And I get to say that because we're celebrating something very special that we're going to be talking about today. But first things first, Josh gets to do his favorite part of the podcast.
Das housekeeping.
Housekeeping. Go ahead.
I don't know where that came from. I'm sure there's one movie where that stemmed from, but now we say it all the time.
Das housekeeping? Is that what you're talking about?
No, just the way we say it, that accent, whatever it is. I don't know. Anyways, we always kick off with some housekeeping, just general things to keep you guys up to speed on what all the haps are over here. So first things first. You okay there? Ace?
The haps?
The haps. What's happening? The haps.
Oh, man.
Have you never heard that?
No, it's not that I haven't.
I'm a product of the 90s.
1900s.
The 1900s. I can't even with that. So, housekeeping. First things first is wherever you're listening to this, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. If you're Neil Armstrong, the moon, apparently.
I'm feeling very spicy today.
Wherever you're listening to it, if you are enjoying this, if you're somebody who this has kind of become part of maybe your weekly rhythm.
Maybe someone is watching this on the moon. Like in the future.
Yeah. Somebody save her right now. I don't know what's happening. But wherever you listen to this, if this has become a part of just your weekly routine or something that you are enjoying or that's benefiting you, we just ask a couple of things. One, we just ask that you would subscribe or follow. It just helps to tell all the powers that be, aka AI, that this is something that is helping people, and then it will put it in the hands of more people that hopefully it will help. So that's our first ask. Our second thing is we just ask that you share about it. So whether that be on social media, whether that be sending it in a text to a friend, like we often do with each other in podcasts, we just ask that you share it because there are just people that that we don't know that that this could help hopefully benefit in their walk with the Lord, in their own healing process. And just journeying as a husband or wife or as a parent or just a follower of Jesus. And so we just ask that you share it. Thank you to those of you who have shared this and who have just supported it and been a part of this for the last couple of years now that we've been doing this. It's been a real joy to just hear how it's helping you, whether that be in your marriage or in just your own walk with the Lord or whatever it might be, parenting. So we thank you guys just for being a part of that.
That's why we do it.
It is why we do it. And then I would say the last thing is as far as if you need more information, we always say every week, you can go to www.restoredliving.org. That's where you can learn more about us and who we are and what this whole Restored Living ministry is and why it started, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about that today too. But then also, it's a great place for you to be able to get in touch with us, whether you just have questions, whether you're wanting to know about working one-on-one together or working with maybe you and your spouse as a couple, all of the information for that is on there, as well as way to get in touch with us. So that's kind of where we keep everything in one easy space.
There's also blogs on there now. I did post the first official one.
Oh my gosh.
But I didn't post about it because we're doing a media fast for Lent. And
So we're doing very little media.
Yes.
But
that's another
you can find
podcast for another day, though.
there.
Yes.
And then also you can find us over on Instagram at Restored Living.
On the
That's where we
IG.
connect with most of you. And so just head over there and we can engage there with you in the comments, in the messages, all the things. I don't know, anything else that I missed that you can think of?
I feel like you always hit it out of the park. Also, Josh should have been a voiceover artist forever ago. Yes.
Maybe in a prior
He
life.
always is the one that the kids choose to do bedtime stories
I do, because I can do like a billion different voices.
Like, share some of them.
Oh.
Before we get into it.
Hello, welcome to this week's podcast. My name is Joshua. This is my wife, Jaelyn. We will be hosting
Do
today.
another one.
Oh no, another one. That's bad enough.
That's
maybe each week I can introduce a new voice.
That's Vladimir.
Actually, yeah, that was named by some friends.
Oh man. Yeah, that's Vladimir.
All right,
there are quite a few. Anyways, we love to have fun here on the podcast.
We do love to have a little bit of fun.
It's my favorite way to start a pod, actually. Just a good laugh with each other.
Nothing like a good laugh.
So today
it's
is
D-Day.
D-Day. It is Deliverance Day.
Not Doomsday.
And the reason why it's Deliverance Day is because a year ago today. Do you want to tell the story?
As of the time we're recording this, which is February 25th, 2024. But a year ago today, I had a very significant moment, a culmination moment with the Lord and my relationship with Him. That was really profound for myself, but also for us as a couple. And I think it wasn't a moment that I think was just for me or for us. I think it was a moment that was for others as well.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, it was a moment for me and the Lord. And the reason we call it Deliverance Day is because, as many of you know, or maybe you don't know, and this is news to you, but when you choose to follow Jesus, it's not like everything magically gets better. Every wound, every hurt, every pain, every issue you've ever dealt with suddenly is totally redeemed. I think of the moment that we come to know Jesus as more of the start of a redemption process, not one and done redemption. So although I've known the Lord for my whole life and I've grown up in the church, I've not avoided pain in my life either. And we talk about that.
And I'm pretty sure episodes 2 and 3 of the podcast.
We talk a little bit about our story. And so,
go watch that if you haven't watched it already. Well, actually, you can only listen to it. That was before video.
Before the times.
But maybe we'll repost it on YouTube just as an audio for you to listen to.
Yeah.
If you're a YouTube listener.
Yes. There were many years of my walk with the Lord, especially I would say in my mid-20s to about a year ago, that were really hard. I wouldn't say there were definitely marked moments of the Lord's goodness and me being able to see that. It's never been I don't think it's ever been an issue of a lack of the Lord's goodness, but there's just been hurt and wounds that kept me from being able to see that. And so a year ago today, as we record this, February 25th, 2023, I had a very significant moment with the Lord. I was in, I don't know, do you want me to just dive right into it? Or where do you want to go with this?
I mean, I totally want you to dive right into it, but I want to give them a little overhead view of where we're going with this.
Yeah. Do it.
So the reason why we wanted to do this podcast was, the Lord asked us to. This was a very, we're not going to go into super huge detail because some of that is meant to be private and just for us. And we're very careful about that with our ministry. We only share what the Lord's asking us to share. And some of the things are in the secret place for you to have with the Lord. Yeah. And so, we will be more general in this podcast, and it's not out of wanting to share the details with you. It's just they don't matter.
Yeah.
This will apply to you if you replace, our hurts with yours. It's very much the same process. Yeah. And I think, obviously the Lord was asking us to do this. Mm-hmm. It's both a very joyful experience of experiencing deliverance from the Lord and being close with him, and it's this great joyous thing, but it also can come with a lot of grief because you think about what you did in your past life, and you think about, you know, just how where the Lord plucked you from.
Yep.
And I think it's so good to have that bittersweet, like when you think about bittersweet chocolate, right? It's like the best kind of chocolate because it's not overly sweet, but it's a little bit sweet. And it's because of that bitterness, or like when you add salt to chocolate to bring out the flavor, it's this thing that you wouldn't think goes together, but salty and sweet do. Right. And so that's where we're going to go with this today, is just sharing a little bit of our story from the last few years that we haven't shared yet, but then also talking about real practical things that the Lord has done in each of our lives separately, because you are an individual. If you're listening to this, yes, you might be married and, you know, that's great, but the Lord cares about your heart, not just you and your spouse's heart. And that's very intentional that he does that. And he wants you to live a restored life. And so that process of restoration has looked different for me than it has for Josh. And I think many people can focus on the behavior and not the sanctification that God's trying to do in us. And so we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah.
Anything else that I missed?
I don't think so.
And leave you with a little encouragement at the end.
Yeah. Always with some
Dive
encouragement.
in then.
Dive
sir.
in.
Tell us the story.
Yeah.
What happened a year ago?
Well, you know, I would say, hopefully you guys can't hear our dog that is freaking out. But I would say that over, if you guys can hear that, I am so sorry. Our dog is freaking out.
We also don't edit these.
No, we don't. So you're just you might hear random pauses as we try to tell what's happening in our house right now.
Yeah.
But I would, you know, over the last, God's been working a lot in my heart over the last 7 years.
Is it almost 7?
Well, no, I'm counting before.
Oh, gotcha.
All the way back to kind of the beginning of my struggles with depression and anxiety.
Before I knew.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But working a lot in my heart over the last several years, in a much slower way than I would have wanted him to, but that's the pace that he takes, because he's not going to rush anything. I think he knows that rushed healing is going to be, it's going to fall short, and he doesn't fall short in his process. And so, it's been a long process, and really the last couple of years, you know, leading up to us finding out about Caden, which was at the start of 22. That was when we found out about him, all the way until February of 23 was a very challenging season in my relationship with the Lord. I'll put it that way. Because if you've listened to any of the other episodes and the things that we talk about, you know, there were things that I had wrestled with for several years, issues of depression and anxiety that would come in very big waves. And it was very cyclical patterns of that, starting in like 2017. And so by the start of 22, it had been 5 years of these constant cycles of depression, anxiety, low weeks or months, followed by some kind of highs, then followed by some more lows. And it was just this back and forth kind of constantly for several years. Some of that was just, chemical and biological nature. Some of it was very emotional and psychological, because of my own woundedness and trauma, but some of it was very spiritual, and just oppression from, I think, the enemy over my own soul. But it manifested in a lot of different ways. There were seasons where it manifested as pornography addiction. A big part of it was just my own struggles around sexuality and struggles around identity there. And so, you know, there was a sense of, just, I think for myself, frustration with the Lord. Like I was like, Lord, I just want my heart wants to just do what's right. Like I want to do what's right and what's good. And so why are you allowing me to constantly kind of ride these waves of ups and downs? Why are you allowing me to kind of constantly struggle with the same things over and over again? And so, you know, for the last couple of years, even in the midst of us, you know, starting this podcast and really starting to share about our process of walking with the Lord, I was still very much, you know, in my process of working in therapy, some kind of new things had come about, some new trauma and things from my own childhood had come about, and for me that unlocked a lot of hurt that I had not been aware of.
Yeah, you were really angry with God.
Yeah. And so it led to a long season of being really angry with the Lord, trying to not be angry with him, but just being angry with him. And it wasn't because he deserved the anger. The anger wasn't really about him. But regardless, that's where I directed it. And so it led to a lot of isolating from the Lord, led to a lot of isolating from Jay and from our family. It led to a lot of self-seeking ways of trying to make myself feel whole again, or maybe whole for the first time. And it was about a year of that. It was about a year of just being completely disconnected from the Lord in any meaningful way. Like I would still show up to church. I would still occasionally read my Bible, occasionally listen to worship music. But it really was probably one of the darkest places I've ever been in, I would say. And
I just want to say one thing about this. So this was the year we took off.
If you guys are wondering why.
And the reason for that, I think it's important to say this part because trouble can find you in any point in your life.
Yeah.
After you know Jesus, before you know Jesus. And it is important in those times. That is why we shrunk away from the outpouring. We had nothing left to pour.
No,
we needed
both
to be poured into.
cups.
Yeah, we needed to be. I was going through the pregnancy stuff and it was very all hands on deck, try to just survive. And so we want you to know you're not a failure if you love Jesus and that happens.
Yeah.
And you struggle.
Yeah.
And Jesus is there. I think that's the big thing I want to hit on is that it is okay to need rest. It is okay for you to need to take a season to step back and be very intentional with the secret place, inward focused, or even taking a season, like Josh is saying, to be mad at the Lord.
Yeah.
Because it just sucks.
Yeah. And I think where I would caution in that is just to say that being mad with the Lord is not wrong. We see a lot of times in scripture where people are mad with the Lord, people who love him, but are mad with him. I think where, at least for me, where that anger took root as doubt and took root as bitterness. And so then I was bitter with the Lord and I was doubtful of him. And that did not produce good fruit in my life. It produced a lot more anxiety, a lot more depression, a lot more erratic behavior, a lot more looking less and less like someone who knew Jesus and more like someone who didn't. And so all of this culminated, that year of 22. There was a lot of counseling. There was a lot of, I would say, the saving grace is that we still had some very healthy, loving Jesus people in our life that were alongside us in that process. Yeah. But in February of 23, after just a series of different events, a job loss, she was still recovering from her pregnancy with Caden.
And still struggling with like depression and body image, and it was tough.
Yeah, and so she was battling depression. I was dealing with depression and anxiety, and to the point of even suicidal thoughts and self-harming behaviors that I had dealt with years ago that had been gone for a long time.
Sin doesn't say small. That's for sure.
And so I had reached this point in February where I just, I would say to some degree it was a gradual realization, but there was also a defining moment too, where I was, and I shared this already on another episode, but I was driving to a friend's house, and mind you, at this point, like nothing had changed about really my heart posture up until this moment. I was still pretty angry with the Lord. My circumstances looked very much the same as they did, but I had this very just, Jay will often call it like a scales falling from the eyes kind of moment.
Like Saul to Paul moment.
Yeah. But just this moment of just realizing my complete and utter inability to save myself. And that me trying to take control of my own life had only resulted in a lot of hurt and a lot of mess and none of the peace that I was looking for, the wholeness that I was looking for. And at the same time, I realized, I had asked God for years, why do you just keep letting me go through these like cycles of things? Why do I keep having these ups and downs? And I don't know if I just didn't think about it until that moment, or if it was a very just sudden realization and the Lord just, maybe I was in a place enough of just, of just complete depravity and realizing that I couldn't fix anything. Maybe I was willing to see it, but the Lord very clearly showed me that the things that I was fighting against were not, it wasn't just my own mind. Like this wasn't just my own mind. This wasn't just my lack of self-control. This wasn't just my lack of desire to quote unquote do the right thing. This was like years of spiritual oppression over me. And I say that knowing that sometimes can sound like, sometimes it can sound like a cop out a little bit, or it can sound over spiritualized. But there has to come a point where we go, okay, if I'm dealing with the same thing over and over, but I'm doing all of the things that should be helping and they're not, then
what am I? Or they would like help for a little while and then it was weird. Like I would tell him, I would see moments of restoration and then moments where he would be like a completely different person than the Josh that I knew.
Right.
And it was in those moments that I just would pray, like, Lord, like help him realize that who he is in you.
Right.
Right. And I do think that when our struggles are identity based, and I think a lot of who the enemy is going after right now, it's identity, like when we think about even the sexuality conversation, that's very closely tied to our identities. And the confusion that Christians want to yell at with like same-sex attraction and homosexuality and lesbianism, and transgenderism even, it's confusion about our identity and who we were created.
Right. And, for me, that sense of just years of asking the Lord, like, why won't you just take this from me? Like, I want to, my heart's desire is to honor you. That. So why are you not taking this thing? Right.
And this thing being
that being the struggles around sexuality and the same-sex attraction and things like that.
Insert your own struggle there, because it doesn't have to be that.
Right. That's where we say, like, at the end of the day, this could have been anything. It could have been any struggle. It could have been, porn. It could have been greed. It could have been food. It could have been alcoholism. It could have been success. It could have been.
Oh, success is a big one.
A lot of different things.
Can we just pause right there and talk about success for a second before you continue?
Sure.
Because I think that is a pretty one that we don't realize gets in the way of our relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. I mean, it's anything that supersedes anything that gets more of your devotion or your reverence than the Lord does is an idol.
Yep.
period. So
Period.
whether that be your own identity, whether it be your success, whether it be any vice that you have,
Yep.
it all
What you
it
think
all
about.
becomes an idol
Yep.
when it supersedes the Lord in any fashion in your life. And for me, the struggle around sexuality had always been this thing of like, it was just so big in my mind. And it was so, there was just so much tied up in that because it is so closely in our culture tied with your identity.
Yep.
And I think especially now. And so there was this sense of, Lord, why won't you just, this thing that's fighting for my identity, like, why won't you just remove it and take it away? And I think this is where the idea of deliverance really comes in for me, because I had to reach a point where I wanted the Lord more than I wanted him to take it away.
Say that again for the people in the back, please.
And I had to reach a moment of desperation where I said, the cry of my heart became not, Lord, take this thing away from me, but Lord, give me you. And I want you to have me. And if you just do that, I know everything will be okay.
It reminds me of, we were singing this song this morning at church and I just bawled. It's been so long since I've heard it. And it was just so timely when when they played that today. Some of you know this song. It's called More of You. And the lyrics are, I want more of you and less of me. Take everything. And I think that,
and then, Lord, all of you is all I need.
All of you is all I need. Take everything. And I wondered and I prayed, Lord, how many of us really feel that way? Like, how many of us, like, that's why I raise my hands in worship now. It's not to look a certain way or to, and I never used to raise my hands in worship, honestly, because it kind of felt weird, you know? And now it's like, no, Lord, like you have all of me. Like, take everything, take everything else that does not, because when you realize what you just said, that I need Jesus more than anything in the world. Yeah. And I'm willing to, more than even self-preservation. It's like the best place to be in.
Yeah. And so I think there had to be that point of, you know, I had asked the Lord for years, asked the Lord for years to deliver me. Like, I had asked those very specific words, Lord, like, deliver me from these things that I don't want, because it would come in these just cycles and these waves. And, you know, it's exhausting to live that way. And, you know, in that moment it was, Lord, I just need you. And you have me, I'm giving you all of me. And at the same time, I had to also declare for myself, because I knew very well in that moment, I was driving in my car and there was just a heaviness in the car. Even as I tried to listen to worship, just this immense heaviness. It was like I could not connect with the Lord, even though I was so desperate to. And it was like my soul just knew that it was being bound up by someone. And for some of you, that might sound weird, because we don't talk about the reality of the enemy that is against us very often. And we don't talk about the reality of spiritual warfare, and we don't talk about the reality of bondage. But it's real, and you can have faith in Jesus and still be bound by things.
Satan takes things that are hurts from our childhood, right?
Or even the rest of our life. I mean, it can be even things that happen to you as an adult, but he takes moments of hurt and woundedness and he uses those as shackles to keep you from being completely free. And so I knew in that moment I had to speak out of the authority that I knew I had as a son of God, to say, Satan, you have to let me go. Like, you have to release me. You don't have authority over me. And so it was very much a 2-step process of me recognizing the reality of who was keeping me bound, but then also turning immediately and recognizing the reality of who had the ability to free me and save me. And it was very, I mean, you want to talk about, it was what I had asked for years, but it did not come in the way that I asked for it. Because in that moment, and since that moment, there has been a freedom for my own soul that I wouldn't say I've ever known before.
There was also a third part to that. I think you should talk about.
There was, and I can get to that. But even prior to what she just mentioned, over the next 48 hours, there was, because there was a space in between that moment and the moment that I had where I shared with her some of the things that have been going on with me over the year before that, because I very much kept her in the dark during that time. We kind of talked about how it was almost like a separation without a separation in some way, because our hearts were just so disconnected that year. And there was so much hurt going on all fronts.
Yeah.
But there very much was in that moment, and then in that moment that followed, a sense of freedom that I had not known before in any of my life.
You worship different that Sunday. It was a Saturday, and you worshiped so differently on Sunday.
Because there was just a profound realization, and this is what I think deliverance is. I think deliverance is when we have a profound realization of our own brokenness and our desperate need for the Lord to rescue us, and nothing else is as important as that to us. There's nothing else in the world more important than our relationship with the Lord. Everything else becomes meaningless. I mean, to a degree, it's not like nothing else means anything, but in the grand scheme of things, you would in that moment give up everything to have your relationship with Jesus.
Yep.
And I hadn't reached a moment like that in my life until then, where I was like, I will give up everything, all the things. Doesn't matter what I have to give up. I will give up everything to have you, Lord. And it was being brought out of my own self-reliance and my own abilities to do anything to save myself, and being brought into a place of complete humility, and complete surrender, where I knew that only the Lord could do anything about my situation. Only the Lord could do anything about any sense of loss or pain or hurt or any of that. That I had no capabilities within myself to do anything about it. And so, following that day, a couple of days later, it was a conversation with me and Jay out on the back patio, and me just sharing all of these things from the last year, everything I had kept pent up, everything I had kept from her. And there was kind of a second wave of that deliverance that took place, because there's a certain aspect of our freedom that comes from not just what happens with the Lord, but then when we take those things and we bring them into the light with another person.
Yep. Another human being, heart to heart.
Yeah.
Next to you.
Where we share and say, this is the reality of me. This is the reality of my life. This is the reality of things that I have done or said. This is the realities of where I've fallen short. And I'm broken and I need Jesus, and bringing that out into the light. There's a certain aspect, I think, of our freedom and our deliverance from the things that bind us that happens in that space too. Yeah. And I think if we stop shy of that, it's incomplete. We don't experience the fullness of that freedom.
And I saw, when you shared that, I saw him convulse a little bit, or not a little bit. I mean, it was a good amount. Like when you shared that, something left you. And it was like I was very aware in that moment that something happened just now, and I don't know what it was, but that was a big deal right there.
Yeah. And I think I think sometimes we think those things don't happen, but you look at scripture and Jesus, Jesus casts out spirits and demons that were oppressive over people. And sometimes we look at those and we don't realize that these are image bearers that have now been marred by spiritual oppression.
Yep.
These aren't demon possessed men and women. These are men and women who are created in the image of God, who have been tainted by the enemy.
Yeah.
And we forget that happens. We forget that that's possible. We forget that there can be,
a story for the Bible. It's a story for today.
We forget that there can be oppression on our souls, that the enemy can have a stronghold or a foothold in our lives, and that doesn't just miraculously disappear.
Just because you prayed a prayer one time or got baptized in the water one time.
Yeah. Because you can grow up in the church, and I'm not speaking as to whether I was saved before or not, and now I am, or like, I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying there was clear evidence in my life that there were areas of stronghold the enemy had in my heart and in my mind that I had not been freed from. And some of that was just my own pride and wanting to be able to prove myself, wanting to be able to be good enough, wanting to be able to show that I could be worthy. And that comes from a lot of stories in my own childhood. But at the end of the day, I had a choice to make of whether I could, choose to recognize my need for a savior and truly understand that, and understand the depth to which I needed him, or choose to continue walking life on my own, trying to figure it out. And it's purely the Lord's grace that I chose the former and not the latter, because in my own humanity, I would not choose surrender. Like, that is not, that's not a popular thing. That's not a self-serving thing, because from that decision of surrender has come a lot of freedom. And there's also been a lot of hard that's come from that too. And a lot of challenge and a lot of things that would just be easier avoided by choosing my own authority over my life. And so even in that decision to turn to God, that was all by his grace alone too. It wasn't by anything. It wasn't because I did something to make myself realize that I needed him. It was because he was just continually pursuing and continually making a way and continually fighting for me and continually providing, even in my unfaithfulness to him. And so, I guess just if you're somebody that's in a place like that, where you are feeling bound by something, and you feel like you're running through these cycles and these patterns, whether it's a certain behavior or just a certain wrestle within your own soul, or something that you feel like just is constantly weighing on you. And you find yourself, you just keep circling back to the same things over and over again. I just want you to know you're not alone in that. But you also don't have to stay there either. Yeah. And there's not a secret formula for any of this. There wasn't like a 3-step process I followed. I didn't read a book on deliverance. I didn't do a certain study. I didn't just read my Bible more. In fact, I had been reading my Bible a lot less. I had been worshiping a lot less. I'm not saying do any of those things. I'm just saying there's no magic formula for you to do. There's no magic way for you. Because again, then it would be you making it happen. This is,
there we go.
This requires a true place in your soul, realizing the desperate need that you have for the Lord, and that he is the only one capable of saving you. He's the only one capable of producing anything good in your life. And that without him, you're nothing.
Yeah.
We're nothing without him. And there's no forcing someone to arrive at that point.
No, you can't make it happen. You can't. It just happens, and it happens at different times for different people. And the Lord knows the time that it's supposed to happen and where you're supposed to be at in your walk with him. And when we trust in that timing and we continue to pursuing, I think that's the other thing. Like, no, there's not a formula. But Jesus is the answer, unfortunately. Like, if you didn't want the Bible answer, the answer is him. But there's a lot of things that we're blind to, that we don't realize are idols in our life, or crowns that we're hoarding, that are crowns that we are hoarding. And so, I'll just dive into my side, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Because obviously Josh was delivered and I was a mess. I was a mess because I had just found out about more. And having never really dealt with a lot of my stuff because I was so busy trying to help Josh heal. And I think this happens a lot when, you're the betrayed spouse and you find out your spouse was unfaithful, because it's never really a cut and dry. Like, they tell you they've been unfaithful and then it never happens again. It just isn't like that, unfortunately.
Or that it's all better in that moment.
Right. Exactly. Because we're humans, like we tend to go back to things. And so, I didn't realize this, but I kind of, throughout our healing process over the last 6 years, I kind of had the attitude like me and God are good. And the me part of that equation was very large. And, I just gone through this year of basically God taking away the me part and me just being so dependent on the Lord. I lost my job. Basically, I was a very successful health coach and I couldn't health coach. I was just me and no achievements, my body was a mess and I had coveted my body for a long time. I've now found out, what I find is we tend to focus on the behavior instead of the root of the behavior. And my toxic behavior just shifted to different things. My idols just shifted to different things instead of being on the Lord. And he knew that. He's gracious about that. And, he gives us relief as we choose to pursue him. But the deliverance part of that doesn't come until, like Josh said, we're totally surrendered to him. And for me, a lot of that stemmed from when I was a really little girl and I almost drowned in a hot tub. And my mom was tending to my sister and I was picked up by a man in a white t-shirt, blue jeans. And when my mom came to get me, there was no man there. And my mom, this is a long story, but my mom got burned pretty severely when she was 9. And she was in the hospital room many times. The doctors didn't think she was going to make it. All this stuff. And she would see this man in a white t-shirt and blue jeans in the corner. And it was an angel. He was never there. And I always have such strong faith because of that story it's my first memory that I remember is being saved. But there was a lot that I carried out of that anger with my mom, and a lot of self-reliance that I carried, that I still had and I didn't realize that I had. Like, you can't hurt me. I'm going to take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, speaking from the perspective of someone who's been cheated on, there's a lot of feelings to that. All of which I won't get into this podcast, maybe another one another time. But there's just there's part of you that is like, I need to protect myself. So I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself. And once Josh, and I could see that Josh was delivered, like that was the coolest moment to get to witness. But I all of a sudden was able to start breathing. Like when you hold your breath, like something's going to happen, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. And then nothing's happening anymore. And you're actually able to breathe. And you're like, have I really never taken like a full breath?
Mm-hmm.
I need to take care of myself. Wow. Like you just kind of come to this realization, like I've been trying to take care of everybody else and I actually need to put the face mask on myself. And so that was my deliverance was a little delayed. And I think that's important, and why we focus on deliverance as individuals, because Josh's timeline was different than mine. And it doesn't mean that his healing is better or, anything like that. But we all have the ability to be delivered, all of us, from the things that ail us. And even though my deliverance actually wasn't really about Josh at all. And I think sometimes we think when we've had infidelity in our marriage, or infidelity in whatever way, or whatever hurt you have, I think it can be easy to feel like it's tied to that person, or it's tied to those things. And it's actually tied to you. And the reason I say that is because my protective walls, my thorns, if you will, that I had on me, like I would not let anybody get close enough to hurt me. And so I would distance myself. No friends, no intimacy with others. Even in our marriage, I was pretty distant in certain ways. And over the next 6 months, working with a therapist, diving deeper into my walk with the Lord, and watching Josh live out his faith was just the culmination of that was so powerful for me. And for me, it was actually after I had a therapy session and finally forgave my mom for not saving me, and finally, just came to that realization, I don't need to. I was in the car. I don't know if I told you that, but I was in the car just singing a worship song, and I was just like, I'm surrendered, Lord. Like, I cannot save myself anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I need you. And I'm so scared that I'm going to get hurt again, but you are my protector, and you're going to hold me in your right hand, and you are going to protect me, and you fill this brokenness. I don't need to save myself anymore. And so for me, that was my moment.
Yeah.
And do you have something to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's important to see that the final realization in both of our stories was the same.
Yeah.
Which was a moment of allowing the Lord to deliver us, not from something, but to deliver us into his hands. In this sense of, we both realize the same thing, which is that, Lord, I can't take care of myself. I can't do this. I'm not strong enough, and I don't need to, but you can, and you will. And it came two very different ways, we both reached that point in a very different way, but our realization and the posture of our hearts was the same, which is that we both had been trying to control outcomes and take care of ourselves for so long. And we both reached a point of realizing that we didn't have to do that anymore, and that we couldn't even do it to begin with. Right. And that he needed to do it. We needed to let him do it. And there was that release from that. There was a freedom that came from that. There was a lightness, I think, in our own spirits that came from that moment of surrender to him.
Yeah. Well, and I used to always ask the Lord, because, you guys know we started this podcast kicking and screaming, really. And the ministry itself, we started kicking and screaming because it's a lot to talk about sexuality, especially in this day and age in the church. And
it's a lot to talk about.
Stay married after the story that we have. And it's just not easy. And people have a lot of opinions. Yeah. And what has been so amazing is watching the Lord just like with grace, like an amazing grace. You should pull up the lyrics to that song. I want to read them. Did I send them to you? I did. Maybe. I didn't realize the amazing gift of grace. Like when we sing Amazing Grace, I don't think we really grasp like the amazing grace that God has until we are face down on the floor, surrendered to him, because our way of doing things just isn't cutting it anymore. And I think a lot of people in the church are doing this. I think a lot of people in the church are like, I go on Sundays, I read my Bible. I have good friends. Like I'm not doing really bad things, but their heart is, that's not the point. Like I remember when the Lord gave me the word restored living and kind of gave me a vision for what this ministry was going to look like. And I was like, Lord, what is restored living? Like, what does that mean? And I feel like over the last 6 years, he's really shown me, even just in the last year after deliverance and being free, this is restored living. It's living with that uncommon, amazing grace that you don't deserve. And the lightness, the easy yoke that is, you know?
Yeah.
Like it really is. Do you have it or
No,
not?
I couldn't find it.
Give me. I find. You
I
talk.
don't know. Maybe I did find it. I don't know. You can tell me if that's what you're looking for.
Yes.
Is it?
Yep. So I love Forrest Frank.
He's an artist.
He's an artist. But he did this whole album that's like hymns.
It's like revamped
hymns. I used to be down so bad, about ready to throw my life away. Didn't know what I had, feeling locked up all night and day. That can be how you feel after accepting the Lord into your heart. Because there's still things in your life that are before him that we don't see or, but I love that he goes into this other, oh, I do not deserve it. I'm too far from worth it. You're the only one who could ever be perfect. Every day I fall short, but still you say I'm yours. What a beautiful noise. And you say you won't go despite all my biggest failures. Tears fill my eyes. Because you came around, picked me off the ground, was lost, but now I'm found. And that's it. Yeah. That's it. It's like we try so hard to be so good enough. And God is like, when you're ready for the real gift, I'll give it to you.
Yeah. There is no sense of performance with the Lord. And I think many of us live our Christian life.
Especially Western Christian life, I feel like.
Right. We live our life sometimes not even knowing that we're being bound by religion. Some of you are bound by religion right now, and that's what you need to be delivered from. Dude. You need to be delivered from the ideology that you were raised in, the image of God you were given, because it was a false God.
Yeah.
You were sold a God who cares about your performance. And God is not looking for a performance. You're not some act there to impress him. You are a servant surrendered to him.
Yep.
And he expects you to be imperfect. There is no sense that the Lord's not surprised when we sin. He's not looking for a perfect life. Like the whole point is us recognizing that we can't. And no, it's not an excuse for us to go on sinning. Scripture says that too. But it is recognizing that we're not called to be some sort of impressive act for him to witness. We're not called to behave all the right ways. We're called to a life of surrender.
Yeah.
And when we live in surrender, more often than not, as we're formed by him, we will look more like him and our choices will look more like his. They will not be perfect. But yes, there will be more evidence of his character in us, but it will not come from it will not come from us aiming to make our behaviors like him. Learning to walk and talk like Jesus and live like Jesus doesn't come from looking at all the things he did and then just trying to go and do those things entirely disconnected from the personhood of Jesus.
Yep.
We will not do those things with the right heart even unless we are connected to him. And some of you right now, your whole life has been about doing all the right things and being a good Christian and putting on a good performance for everybody. Meanwhile, hiding all of your secrets because you can't dare let people see those. And the beauty of the church is that it's the opposite, right? Jesus came to turn the kingdom upside down and flip things on its head. You had the Pharisees, who were the most prominent in the church, walking around looking perfect to everyone, hiding all their sin, right?
Yep.
And then you had all of these sinners who were not worthy. You know, they would condemn left and right, this person and that person. And Jesus came and he completely turned it upside down, and he surrounded himself with the outcasts, brought them the good news of the gospel and redemption, and then said, like, I am here to set you free, not your behaviors, not your performance.
Well, we try to become God, right? Like we're trying to do all of these things to become more like Christ in the Christian church. And like you said, it's totally missing the point.
Well, because they're completely disconnected from him.
The bridge. Like,
right.
There is no, God doesn't need us to try and be like him.
No.
God just needs us to let him be him.
Mm-hmm. And we're just called to abide in him. It's when we abide in him that our...
Okay.
It's when we abide in him that our characteristics change and our behaviors change.
Yep.
And I think that would be my encouragement to any of you who are finding yourself stuck in these patterns, whether it's a behavior, whether it's the same old sin, whether it's the same cycles that you're going through over and over again. The freedom that you're looking for is going to be found abiding in Christ and living in truth. You have to be honest about the reality of your story. You have to be honest about if you're hiding in sin right now, you have to bring it out. You have to stop putting on a performance for people. If you want to experience deliverance, you have to stop putting on a performance. Somebody has got to see the real you.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is they've got to see all of the mess, all of the mistakes. There was a post a year ago, it was on February 25th, that a friend of ours shared, Carrie. And the post was really simple. I have it saved in my phone, and it said, Jesus can heal what you're hiding.
Ooh.
And I think some of you need to hear that, which is that Jesus can heal what you're hiding. And he wants to, but you have to stop hiding it.
Yeah.
And you have to bring it out into the light. That's part of the act of surrender, is bringing the truth into the light and trusting that he will do with it what he needs to, that he will do something that is for your good and for his glory, because you are choosing him. You are choosing him over everything else, choosing him over your self-preservation, over your pride, over your need to protect yourself, choosing him over your image, choosing him over the insecurity that you feel, the worry you feel, the shame that you feel, and trusting that he really is as good as he says he is. And he will set you free. He will give you freedom from the things that are weighing on you. It will be a process. Some of it might be in an instant. Some of it might be over the course of several weeks or months or years, but he does promise to do it, and he does fulfill on his promises. And he wants that for you. He wants freedom for you. He wants redemption for you. But he wants it to be real. He doesn't want it to be a facade. He doesn't want it to be an act. He doesn't want it to be something that just looks good on the outside, but is leaving you empty on the inside. Yeah. He wants it to be full and real.
Yeah. And I guess what I would leave you guys with encouragement as we wrap up this podcast is, for those of you who have been really hurt by someone, strength comes from surrender. And it's the scariest place that you want to be, I think, right now, if you feel that ache that someone has hurt you, or you feel ashamed that you got hurt the way you did. And I want you just to know that strength comes from surrender. That when we do surrender those things, our need for control, our need to make sure that I don't get hurt, that I can survive, that those kinds of things, you have a protector that wants to protect you. But you have to give yourself to him. You have to give yourself to him, because your ways of protecting yourself are not going to work.
Right.
They're going to hurt you more. They're going to hurt other people in your life. Yeah. I was an angry, anxious mess, and I would wear shirts that say I am strong. And I can't even wear those shirts anymore because I'm not strong. I'm so weak, but it's in my weakness that I have strength, because Jesus can be the stronger glue than I could ever be.
Right.
than the temporary things that I tried to heal myself with.
Yeah.
And so I want to encourage you, if your story is more of being hurt by people, I'm sorry. It's not your fault, but you are responsible for your healing. And Jesus wants to heal you. He comes back for the adultered. He does. And he is the perfect groom. And he wants to wed you. We were just reading in Hosea yesterday, just like how the Lord asks Hosea to marry Gomer. And she's like a promiscuous girl. And that was like way against what Hosea was supposed to do. And in the culture, but Hosea did it because the Lord asked, and it's a beautiful love story. And so,
and it's an example of God's continuous pursuit of us when we betray him over and over, you know, in our own self-righteousness and our own self-reliance, realizing that he continues to forgive us.
Yeah. And so, you know, we wanted to share this with you today because when we run this ministry, Restored Living, we're not just content with behavior change.
Yeah.
We want you guys to feel what it is like to live restored, because it is the best way to live.
Yeah.
Surrendered, grace-filled, kneeling at the altar of the Lord, because he is the one that takes these broken pieces and puts them back together. And you cannot do this.
Oh.
It takes rebuilding that we have to do, work that we have to do in therapy, things that we have to realize about ourselves. God uses all of that, and then he restores. He does what only he can do.
Yeah.
And that makes the renewed creation. Any other words?
That's good. No.
Our son might get mad at us if we keep going.
That's good. But we love you guys. We hope this encourages you and continues to spur you on in your walk with the Lord. He really is that good. He really is. He really is all that you need. And that's not just a cliche. That's not just a platitude. That comes from a deep understanding of there's just nothing that satisfies like he does. Yeah. And so we love you guys. We are praying for you constantly and just the things you're walking through. And we're just praying that the Lord continues to show you the ways in which he wants to redeem the things that feel broken to you.
Yeah. So let's go live today restored.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Head so heavy on the pillowcase, eyes staring out the window pane. The harder that